Hello, NDE narrator. I really love your content, all the way from Japan, and I pray for more subscribers for your channel. My name is Grace Yui Nakamura, and I want to share my conversion story. I was born on March 3, 1994, in Kyoto, Japan, a city known for its temples, shrines, and deep spiritual heritage. I grew up in a traditional household with my father Haruki, a public school teacher, my mother Ayano, who worked part-time at a tea house, and my younger brother Daichi, who was always full of questions. From my earliest memories, our lives were framed by ritual. We had a kamidana, a household Shinto altar, in our living room. Every morning, my father would bow twice, clap his hands twice, and offer a silent prayer to the kami, the divine spirits. My mother taught me to place offerings of rice and salt neatly on the tray. On New Year's Day, we visited the shrine at Yasuka Jinja as a family. Shinto wasn't just a belief, it was the air we breathed, the rhythm of our daily life. As a child, I looked forward to seasonal festivals like Shichi-go-san, a celebration for children aged 3, 5, and 7. My mother dressed me in a pink kimono with floral patterns and took me to Fushimi Inari Taisha, the famous shrine with thousands of vermilion torii gates winding through the wooded hills. It was my favorite place in the world, silent, sacred, and beautiful. The smell of incense and the faint clang of bells gave me a sense of calm. We offered coins, bowed, and made our wishes. Later, we'd buy omamori, small amulets said to bring good luck or protection, from the miko, the shrine maidens in white and red robes. These charms were kept in my school bag, in my purse, even sewn inside my jacket. They were believed to protect me from accidents and failure. Shinto wasn't something I questioned. It was identity, community, and obligation. To be Japanese was to revere the kami. For those unfamiliar with Shinto, let me explain. It isn't a religion in the Western sense. There's no founder, no doctrine, and no sacred text. It's a way of honoring the spirits, kami, that dwell in nature, objects, and ancestors. A mountain, a river, a tree, even a fox can host a kami. At shrines, people pass through torii gates, symbolizing the entrance into sacred space. They purify their hands and mouths with water before approaching the altar. Omamori, those tiny silk charms, are blessed by priests and meant to offer divine protection. Miko, or shrine maidens, assist in rituals and perform ceremonial dances during festivals. I used to admire them with awe. Their grace, their posture, their silence. I often imagined myself in their role, standing beside the altar, embodying purity and discipline. In our schools, we were taught to respect these traditions, to preserve our harmony with nature and the spirits that dwell within it. My devotion deepened when I turned 13. That year, my grandfather passed away, and I began spending more time at Ise Grand Shrine, the holiest site in all of Shinto. Located in Mie Prefecture, Ise is dedicated to Amaterasu, the sun goddess and mythical ancestor of the imperial family. My father, who took the role of family patriarch after Gigi died, insisted we make a pilgrimage there every summer. We woke up before dawn, wore white clothes, and walked barefoot through the gravel paths as a form of purification. The shrine buildings were elegant but simple, made entirely of cypress wood and rebuilt every 20 years. I remember standing before the closed inner sanctum, knowing I could never see inside. Only priests and members of the imperial family are allowed beyond those gates. Yet I felt something sacred just standing there. That summer, I told my mother I wanted to become a miko and serve at a shrine. She smiled and placed her hand on my head. That would be an honor, she said. In our family, to serve the kami was among the noblest aspirations. My cousin Ayaka was already volunteering part-time at a local shrine in Higashiyama. She helped clean the grounds, assist with rituals, and prepare seasonal offerings. I began accompanying her on weekends. I learned how to fold the sheet, zigzag paper streamers used to mark sacred objects. I helped rake the leaves around the torii gates and swept the stone steps until they glistened. I began to wear the miko uniform, white top, red hakama, and even performed my first kagura dance during the Setsubun festival, meant to chase away evil spirits. I was so proud. At school, My teachers praised my respectfulness. My friends joked that I'd marry a priest. I didn't mind. I felt useful, rooted. My life had meaning. I was living in harmony with my ancestors, my culture, and my country. Everything about Shinto made sense to me then. It taught me that purity is important, that silence is sacred, and that balance must be maintained between the spiritual and physical world. I was proud to be Japanese, and in my mind, to be Japanese was to honor the kami. My dreams were simple: finish high school, train officially at a major shrine like Meiji Jingu in Tokyo, and dedicate my life to service. I had no exposure to anything outside my own worldview. Christianity, to me, was a Western religion, foreign, strange, even dangerous. I'd heard rumors that people who became Christians lost their families, or worse, lost their way. I never questioned it. I believed what I was told. Why would anyone trade the beauty of our traditions for something that didn't belong to our land? That thought seemed foolish at the time. But that was before the questions began, the ones I never thought I'd dare to ask. The questions started quietly, like whispers in the back of my mind. I didn't say them out loud, not even to Ayaka or my mother. It began during Obon, the annual festival to honor the spirits of our ancestors. We lit incense, placed offerings of fruit and rice before the kamidana, and stood in silence, believing the spirits had returned. But that year, something inside me felt empty. I stared at the flickering candle in front of my grandfather's picture and felt nothing. I wanted to feel his presence, to hear something, anything, but the room was silent. My mother bowed deeply, tears in her eyes. I copied her out of habit. As I left the room, I asked myself, if our ancestors come back, why don't we hear from them? I shook off the thought and told myself it was a bad question. But that question returned, stronger, again and again. Soon after, I visited a small shrine in Nara with Ayaka. A woman about my age stood at the altar, crying softly. She clutched an omamori to her chest and whispered a prayer, probably for her sick child or dying parent. I stood back and watched her for a long time. When she turned to leave, her face still looked desperate. She didn't seem comforted. That image stayed with me. I began to notice more. People coming to the shrine with heavy burdens and leaving with the same weight in their eyes. Even at Fushimi Inari, I saw salarymen bowing with tired faces, elderly women touching their foreheads to the stone as if trying to find peace, but none of them ever smiled after. Why? We did everything right. We followed the rituals, wore the right robes, offered the food, bowed, clapped, prayed. But no answers came. The kami remained silent. I started wondering if they were even listening. These thoughts frightened me. Shinto had always been comforting. No dogma, no judgment, just reverence and harmony. But now it began to feel like a hollow shell. I remembered one rainy afternoon when I asked my father, "What happens to the soul after death?" He looked up from his newspaper and said, "The soul joins nature. It's reborn in the world." I asked, "So, will we see Gigi again?" He paused and smiled gently. "We don't ask such things. We just honor him." That answer didn't satisfy me. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I genuinely wanted to understand. That night, I wrote in my diary, "If the kami love us, why don't they speak? Why do people suffer even when they pray every day?" I hid the notebook under my mattress. I was afraid that if anyone found it, they would think I was becoming ungrateful or disrespectful. But deep down, I knew something in me was shifting. I began avoiding the shrine. At first, it was subtle. I'd say I was tired or had homework. Ayaka noticed but didn't press. At home, I skipped the morning bow before the kamidana and pretended I forgot. Every time I held an omamori now, it felt like I was clutching fabric with no meaning. I still wore it out of habit, but my belief was fading. One night, unable to sleep, I sat at my desk and opened my school laptop. I typed into Google, "Do kami answer prayers?" The search led me to message boards, but nothing helped. Then a few days later, while watching an old documentary about world religions on YouTube, I stumbled across a thumbnail titled, "Why Jesus Still Heals." I hesitated, hovered my mouse over it, then clicked. The speaker was a foreign man. He talked about his broken life and how Jesus changed him. I didn't understand much, but something about it stirred me. That video led to another, and then another. Some were testimonies, others were clips of preachers. I didn't agree with everything. Some parts even made me angry. How could someone claim Jesus is the only way? That sounded arrogant, but there was something different about how these people spoke. They talked about forgiveness, about love, about hearing from God directly. One woman described how she cried out to Jesus and he answered her in a dream. I closed the laptop, heart racing. It felt like I had peeked into something forbidden. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. I cried out and he answered. I never felt that before. I began to wonder, not out of rebellion, but out of longing. What if there's more than silence? What if God truly speaks and I just hadn't met him yet? A few weeks later, I had a dream. It was vivid, so vivid it shook me awake at 4:12 a.m. In the dream, I was walking through a dark forest. The trees were tall and the ground was cold. I was alone. I kept calling out, "Kami-sama, doko desu ka? God, where are you?" But no voice replied. Then ahead of me, I saw a light. Not just any light, it pulsed like a heartbeat and felt warm even in the dream. I walked toward it, and there stood a man in white. His face was gentle, but I couldn't see his eyes. He didn't speak, but I heard something inside me say, "I've heard your cry." I woke up crying. I didn't understand it. Who was that man? Why did I feel peace instead of fear? I sat on my futon for hours, staring at the ceiling, unable to go back to sleep. After that dream, something inside me broke open. I started looking for more testimonies about Jesus in Japanese. There weren't many, but I found a blog by a woman named Naomi Takagi from Fukuoka. She wrote about leaving Shinto after a vision of Jesus and how her family disowned her. Her words felt familiar. "I used to bow to a God I could not hear," she wrote, "but Jesus called my name." I bookmarked the page and read it again the next night. For the first time in my life, I felt less alone in my doubts. At school, I still smiled and acted normal. At home, I continued to help with chores. But inside, I was no longer the same. My heart was moving in a direction I couldn't explain. I didn't know what I was searching for, but I knew it wasn't found at the shrine anymore. I wanted answers, not ritual, not tradition. I wanted truth. I still kept my new curiosity secret. I didn't want my parents to worry or my friends to laugh. I even considered deleting my browsing history just in case. But the dream wouldn't leave me. I wrote it down in my diary and underlined the words, "I've heard your cry." Who had heard me? Was it Jesus? Was he truly alive, or was it just my mind trying to comfort itself? I didn't know, but I was beginning to hope. And hope is dangerous in a place where conformity is safety. Still, I couldn't go back to who I was. I had seen too much, felt too much, questioned too deeply. Something had begun, and even if I tried, I couldn't stop it now. My crisis of faith was no longer just private. It was becoming a path. And although I didn't yet know where it would lead, I was slowly walking out of the forest, one uncertain step at a time. It was a cold evening in February when everything finally collapsed inside me. I had just finished helping my mother fold laundry, and I told her I was going to bed early. But instead of sleeping, I sat on the tatami mat in my room with the lights off. I had this aching heaviness in my chest that I couldn't explain. I opened my laptop and stared at the same blog by Naomi Takagi that I had read so many times. I whispered into the darkness, "If you're real, Jesus, show me." I didn't expect anything, but suddenly a wind moved through my room. My window was closed, the air was still, but something stirred. I froze. The silence turned dense, like the air itself had weight. Then I saw light, not from a lamp, not from my screen, but from within the room. It filled every corner, soft but powerful, and then I saw him. He wasn't like the paintings or pictures I had seen online. He had no crown of thorns or bleeding hands. He stood wearing a simple white robe, his eyes fixed on mine with such kindness I forgot to breathe. He didn't speak with his mouth, but I heard him clearly inside me. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I didn't know it then, but those words were from Matthew 11:28. I collapsed forward, tears pouring from my face. I couldn't explain why I was crying, only that it felt like every sadness, every fear, every unspoken prayer had been touched and healed in one moment. I couldn't stop weeping. I held my chest and whispered, "Who are you? Why do I feel this way?" But deep inside, I already knew the answer. This was Jesus, not a foreign god, not a myth. He was real, and he had found me. I sat on the floor like that for over an hour. When the light faded, I was still crying, but it wasn't the same kind of crying I had known before. It wasn't grief. It wasn't confusion. It was relief. Something heavy had lifted from my shoulders. It felt like I had been seen for the first time, not by my family, not by society, but by God. The real, living God. I touched my face and whispered, "Thank you." I didn't know how to pray. I didn't have the right words, but I remember saying, "I don't understand everything, but I believe you are who you say you are." That was the night I said yes in my heart. I didn't speak it out loud, but in my soul, I surrendered. I had been searching for years without knowing it, and in one night, Jesus had answered without me even calling properly. He came and he stayed. The days that followed were quiet but full of meaning. I went about my normal routines, school, chores, helping my mother, but everything felt different. I was seeing the world with new eyes. I looked at the Kamidana and didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't feel guilt for not bowing. I felt peace. Not because I was rebelling, but because I had met someone greater, someone who didn't require rituals or offerings, but who offered himself instead. I began waking up earlier just to sit by my window and talk to him. No incense, no bells, just whispered words and tears. I asked him to help me understand. I asked him to forgive me for the bitterness I had held in my heart. I thanked him for seeing me when no one else did. One morning, I opened my phone and searched Jesus, Matthew, rest, and found the verse. I read it over and over. "I will give you rest." That one sentence changed everything. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't have to perform to be accepted. I didn't have to be perfect to be loved. Jesus didn't come to me because I earned it. He came because I was broken, and he chose to love me anyway. I still had no Bible of my own, but I saved verses on my phone. I read the Gospel of John through a Christian website in secret. One line stayed with me. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. That was what I had experienced, light in my darkness. I started journaling again, but now it wasn't questions. It was prayers, simple ones. "Thank you, help me understand, stay with me." I didn't know what being a Christian meant yet. I only knew that I could no longer deny Jesus. He was no longer a distant figure. I had met him. One Sunday afternoon, I passed by a small shrine on my way home from the train station. I had walked that road countless times before, but that day I stopped. The red torii gate stood proud and silent. A few people entered, bowed, and rang the bell. I stood outside and watched. My chest felt tight, not from guilt, but from clarity. I realized I no longer belonged to this place. I didn't hate it. I wasn't angry, but I no longer believed in what it offered. I crossed the street and sat on a park bench across from the shrine. I took out my phone and wrote one line in my notes app. "I am yours, Jesus." That was the first time I said it with finality. I didn't know what would happen next, but I had peace. I wasn't walking alone anymore. I had taken his hand, and he was leading me now. That night, I finally prayed out loud. I sat in my room, closed the door, and said softly, "Jesus, I don't know much, but I know you came for me. I believe you love me. I believe you're the Son of God. I accept you." I felt something stir again in the room, gentle, familiar, like the first time he appeared. My tears came again, not from sadness, but from knowing I was no longer lost. I didn't hear voices. I didn't see visions this time, but I felt him, deeply, clearly. I held my hands to my heart and said it again, "I am yours." I had no mentor, no pastor, no church, but I had Jesus. That was enough. And though I didn't know it then, this was only the beginning. My secret faith would soon be discovered, and the cost of following him, especially in Japan, would be far greater than I imagined. But even then, I never regretted it. It didn't take long before people started noticing that I was changing. My mother was the first to sense something. One morning, as we prepared breakfast together, she paused while arranging the rice and said, "Yui, you haven't bowed at the kamidana in weeks." I gave her a nervous smile and said I had been tired lately, distracted. But she knew better. In our home, skipping shrine rituals wasn't a small matter. It was a sign of disrespect to the ancestors. I used to keep an omamori charm attached to my school bag, the same one I had purchased at Ise Grand Shrine years ago. One day, I quietly took it off and placed it in a drawer. My father noticed it missing and asked if I had lost it. I shook my head and told him I didn't feel the need for it anymore. That was the beginning of the first serious tension in our home. At the time, I was working as a part-time assistant at Heian Publishing House, a respected company in Kyoto that produced educational materials and cultural books. I was proud to work there, even if only as a junior staff member, because it was seen as honorable. Our office observed traditional customs. Every Monday morning started with greetings and a short prayer to the kamidana set on a wooden shelf in the main corridor. For a while, I went through the motions just to avoid suspicion, but the deeper my faith in Jesus grew, the more uncomfortable I felt bowing to spirits I no longer believed in. Eventually, I stopped. I would pretend to adjust my shoe or glance at my phone just as the prayer began. My team leader, Mr. Tanaka, noticed and raised an eyebrow one morning. "Yui-san," he said afterward, "are you feeling unwell lately?" I nodded and said, "Just a little headache." I didn't dare tell the truth yet, but the truth found its way out, quietly, suddenly, and without warning. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I forgot to zip my handbag. As I bent over to plug in my phone charger, a small New Testament slipped out and fell onto the office floor. It had been given to me by a kind foreign missionary I had met near Kyoto Station just a few weeks earlier. I had kept it hidden in my bag ever since. My coworker, Emmy, picked it up before I noticed. She held it in her hands for a few seconds, blinking at the Japanese characters on the cover. Shinyak Seishel, New Testament. Her face tightened. "Is this yours?" she asked. My heart pounded. I didn't answer. She placed it on my desk without a word and walked away. I knew then that everything was about to change. That evening, I barely slept. I waited for the consequences that I knew would come. The next morning, I was called into a meeting with Human Resources. Mr. Tanaka was there, along with two senior managers. I sat in silence as they placed the Bible in the center of the table. "Yui-san," one of them began, "we have received reports that you are bringing Christian materials into the office." I nodded quietly. "You do understand," he continued, "that our company operates within the framework of traditional values. We preserve Japanese culture. Any personal belief that conflicts with that spirit is viewed as cultural insubordination." I didn't argue. I just said I didn't mean to offend anyone. But it didn't matter. By the end of that meeting, I was told that my contract would not be renewed. "You are free to believe what you want," Mr. Tanaka added with a forced smile. "But this is not the place for it." I bowed politely, collected my things, and left the building without saying goodbye to anyone. The walk home from the publishing house felt heavier than ever before. The sky was gray, and the streets of Kyoto felt colder, harsher. I had always felt safe in the structure of my country, its expectations, its customs, but now that very structure had turned against me. When I got home and told my parents what had happened, the silence in the room was unbearable. My father sat still for several minutes, his jaw tight. "So it's true," he said at last. "You've become one of them." My mother looked as if I had betrayed her. "Kristen," she whispered, her voice shaking, "how could you?" I tried to explain that I hadn't joined a cult or lost my mind. I tried to tell them about the peace I had found, the love I had never known before. But they didn't hear me. To them, I had thrown away centuries of honor for a foreign god. The next few days were the hardest of my life. Word spread quickly through our extended family. My aunt stopped returning my messages. My cousin Ayaka, who once trained with me at the shrine, blocked me on every social app. Even old friends from school began to avoid me. One former classmate sent me a short message. "You've dishonored your ancestors. You're not Japanese anymore." That sentence broke me in a way I can't explain. I sat alone in my room, staring at my reflection in the mirror, asking myself who I really was. Could I still be Japanese if I no longer believed in Shinto? Could I love my country and still follow Jesus? Was I truly a traitor, as they said? I didn't have answers, but I knew I couldn't go back. I had tasted truth. I had seen the light. Even if I was now hated, rejected, or misunderstood, I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I thought of Jesus, standing in my room just weeks before, eyes full of compassion. I remembered the words I had read on my phone. "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me." Matthew 5:11. Those words were now real. I wasn't being attacked physically, but my identity, my place in society, my belonging, everything I had depended on was being stripped away. Yet, through the shame, I also felt strangely strengthened. This suffering wasn't meaningless. It was part of the cost. I began to understand what it meant to carry a cross. My life would never be the same again. I had lost my job, my reputation, and my place in my family, but I had found Jesus. And even in the darkness, that was enough for me to keep going. After losing my job and the respect of my family, I felt invisible. But strangely, I didn't feel defeated. In fact, something inside me grew stronger. I spent my mornings reading the Gospel of John on my phone and journaling quiet prayers at night. The rejection didn't crush me. It pushed me closer to Jesus. One day, I opened a private account on Twitter under the name Light in Kyoto and began posting short messages about my journey. I wrote in Japanese, "I lost everything, but I found peace. His name is Jesus." I shared Bible verses, testimony clips, and reflections in small pieces. At first, it felt like shouting into the dark, but slowly, followers trickled in, some curious, some angry. Then, without warning, one of my tweets went viral. I had shared John 14:6 with a photo of a Torii gate, writing, "No gate brings salvation, only Jesus does." Within 24 hours, the backlash exploded. Thousands of replies came, some threatening, some mocking, some just confused. Many accused me of being brainwashed by Western missionaries. Others said I was dishonoring Japan and insulting Shintoism. One tweet said, "Go back to your cult. You are a disgrace to your ancestors." I tried not to reply in anger. I simply posted another verse. "Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you." I never imagined the situation would escalate further. But then, someone reported my account to the local authorities. They claimed I was involved in promoting illegal religious activities and possibly recruiting for a foreign cult. 3 days later, I was walking home from a small grocery store in the Shimogia ward when 2 plainclothes officers approached me. "Nakamura Yui-san," one of them asked. "We need to ask you some questions." I was escorted without resistance. I knew it was coming. I had already surrendered to Jesus. Whatever came next, I would face it with him. I was taken to Kyoto Municipal Detention Center, a gray, cold facility not far from Umakoji Park. The processing was fast but humiliating. They took my phone, my bag, and my notebooks. I was told I was being held for questioning in relation to online religious radicalization and public disturbance. I wanted to laugh, but my throat was dry. I was not radical. I was just speaking the truth I had found. They placed me in a small, concrete cell with no windows. The light stayed on 24 hours a day. There was a thin mattress on the floor and a toilet in the corner. Meals were delivered through a hatch: rice, miso, and pickled vegetables. The silence was overwhelming. I had never known isolation like this before. For the first time since meeting Jesus, I felt afraid. Not because I doubted him, but because I was alone in a place where everything familiar had been stripped away. The guards didn't say much to me, except when necessary. But one of them, an older man with a shaved head, began mocking me. Each morning when he slid the breakfast tray in, he'd mutter, "Still praying to your foreign god?" Or, "The commie don't want you anymore." Sometimes he chuckled and said, "Jesus won't save you here." At first, I cried in silence. Then I began whispering prayers through my tears. I recited the few verses I had memorized. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Each time the door opened, I would whisper, "Jesus, stay with me." I had no Bible, no fellowship, no music, only silence. But in that silence, I heard him more clearly than ever. I had long conversations with Jesus in my heart. I poured out my fears. I told him I missed the warmth of his presence. And one night, he came to me again. It was the third week of detention. I hadn't seen a mirror in days. I didn't know what I looked like anymore. My body was weak. I lay on the cold mat, shivering and whispering Psalm 23 over and over. That night in my sleep, I saw him again. Jesus was sitting beside me on the floor. He didn't speak at first. He just placed his hand on my shoulder. His eyes looked at mine, full of peace. Then he finally said, "I am with you, even here." I wept in the dream, and when I woke up, my face was wet with tears, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I stood up, faced the tiny window in the door, and whispered, "Thank you." I wasn't forgotten. Jesus was with me in the detention center, just as he had been in my bedroom. The walls didn't matter. The guards didn't matter. My soul was not in chains. That dream gave me strength for the rest of the time I was held. I prayed for the guards. I asked God to forgive the man who mocked me. One afternoon, I even said, "God bless you," as he handed me my lunch. He didn't reply, but that wasn't the point. My job wasn't to win arguments, it was to love. I remembered Matthew 5:44. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Each time I wanted to break down, I clung to that truth. I even started writing verses with my fingernail on the edge of the mattress, just to read them silently when I felt weak. I made up songs and hummed them in my mind. They weren't beautiful, but they were mine. I worshipped in secret, behind bars, like the early believers I had read about. And somewhere in the silence, I knew I was exactly where God wanted me to be. After 29 days, a lawyer appointed by a Christian legal aid group secured my release. There were no formal charges filed, but I was given a warning letter and told that I was under surveillance. I walked out of the detention center with no job, no home, and no clear future. But I was not broken. I was not lost. Jesus had walked with me through one of the darkest places in my life. He had comforted me, strengthened me, and reminded me that my identity was no longer tied to culture or family or even freedom. It was tied to him. I walked slowly down the sidewalk outside Kyoto Municipal Detention Center, the cool air hitting my face like a blessing. I had never felt so physically weak and spiritually strong at the same time. And I knew with complete certainty that my life was no longer mine. It belonged fully, completely, forever to Jesus Christ. After I walked out of Kyoto Municipal Detention Center, I had nowhere to go. My parents refused to take me in. I sent a short message to my mother from a payphone, just letting her know I was alive. She didn't reply. I wandered Kyoto for hours with a small backpack and my worn shoes, feeling like a stranger in my own city. That night, I slept in a women's internet cafe near Karasuma Oike. The manager showed pity and let me stay for free. I spent the next 2 days contacting a Christian woman I had spoken to once before. Her name was Grace Williams, a missionary from Canada based in Osaka. I had met her near Kyoto station weeks before my arrest. I didn't know if she'd remember me, but when she picked up the phone and I told her my name, she said, "Yui, I've been praying for you." That moment I broke down and cried. Grace arranged for me to be taken to a discreet safe house in Osaka, operated by a small underground Christian network. The building looked like a regular old apartment from the outside, gray walls, no signs, no markings. Inside, it was warm and quiet, with a single tatami room and a kitchen filled with the smell of tea and miso soup. An elderly couple, Keiko and Hiroshi, welcomed me like family. They said they had been hiding converts for years. Every evening, a small group of 5 or 6 believers met there in secret. We sat on the floor, shared food, and read the Bible quietly, always cautious of who might be listening. The windows were covered and phones were turned off. It was nothing like the shrines I used to serve. No robes, no incense, no rituals. But the presence of God was strong. I felt something new for the first time since my release. Safety. Not in the world, but in His presence. In that small room, the healing began. Not all at once, but slowly, gently, with care. My body had become weak from detention. My stomach hurt constantly, and I had frequent migraines. My soul also carried deep wounds, betrayal, abandonment, fear. But during those nightly gatherings, the believers laid hands on me and prayed. They quoted Isaiah 53:5 over me. "By His wounds, we are healed." At first, I didn't feel anything, but after a week, the migraine stopped. I could eat without pain. And then, one night during a time of prayer, I felt something break inside me. A deep cry came out of my mouth, one I didn't plan or control. I wept for nearly an hour, as if something was being pulled out of me. When I finished, I felt lighter, almost as if I could breathe again. Hiroshi looked at me and said, "God just delivered you, Yui. Your chains are gone." And I believed him. A few weeks later, Grace told me that a pastor she knew was willing to baptize me, quietly and safely. I had read about baptism in the book of Acts, but I never imagined I would be able to do it in Japan. That Sunday morning, before dawn, I was taken to Kobe Union Church, a small Protestant congregation with an international presence. The building was tucked away near the Kitano district. The pastor, Reverend Daniel Okabe, had baptized several hidden believers before me. The sanctuary was empty, except for 3 others who came as silent witnesses. We sang one hymn softly, "Amazing Grace," and I stood in a shallow tub filled with warm water. Pastor Daniel looked me in the eyes and asked, "Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and your Savior?" I nodded with tears. He said, "Then I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." And I went under. As I came out of the water, I felt new. Not in the emotional way I expected, but in a deep, spiritual sense. Like something old had been buried and something alive had taken its place. That day, I wrote a short prayer in my journal. "Jesus, I am no longer an orphan. I am yours." The pastor gave me a Japanese New Testament and a notebook filled with handwritten encouragement from believers around the world. "You are not alone," one note said. "Heaven rejoices with you." I spent the following weeks studying scripture with Grace and other believers. They taught me how to understand context, how to pray through the Psalms, how to memorize key verses. For the first time, I wasn't reading to get points or impress anyone. I was reading because I wanted to know God. And the more I read, the more I realized He had been with me from the very beginning. One night, while reading Romans chapter 8, I stopped at verse 18. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. I sat back and wept again, not because I was broken, but because I was finally whole. The house church began to feel like family. One sister, Naomi, said, "Yui, your story is not a tragedy, it's a calling." Those words stayed with me. I had spent months thinking I was a victim of injustice. But now I saw the truth. God had used everything, the job loss, the prison, the rejection, to bring me to himself. The shame no longer had power over me. The silence from my parents no longer controlled me. I was healed in body and spirit. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew who held me, and that gave me more courage than I had ever known. Sometimes I sit by the window in my new apartment and look out at the city skyline, thinking about everything that has happened. It feels like a lifetime has passed since I was that obedient shrine maiden in training, folding paper streamers at Fushimi Inari Taisha. I used to believe ritual was everything: precision, silence, perfection. But now I know that what I longed for all along was not a ritual, but a relationship. The difference is everything. Ritual is something you perform to earn something, but relationship is what Jesus gave me freely, without cost, without requirement, without shame. When I talk to him now, I don't need incense or offerings. I just whisper, "Jesus," and he listens. From a scared girl abandoned by her family to a woman restored and alive, my journey has shown me one truth again and again. Jesus is enough, and not just enough, he is everything. I've come to understand why Jesus said in Matthew 10:22, "You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved." The hatred I faced wasn't because I hurt anyone. It wasn't because I disrespected people. It was because I dared to love the name of Jesus openly. That name shakes the world. That name brings peace to the broken and offense to the proud. When I was mocked, when I was fired, when I was locked in a detention cell and told I was a disgrace to my country, I remembered John 15:18. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. These words gave me strength. My suffering wasn't a curse, it was a confirmation. I belonged to him now, and to suffer for his name was the greatest honor. Through those wounds, he poured out his healing. After my baptism and a season of rest, I knew it was time to begin again. Grace Williams and the believers in Osaka helped me quietly relocate to Fukuoka Prefecture, where no one knew my past. I legally changed my name to Grace Nakamura. Grace, because that's what Jesus gave me when I deserved nothing. I found a job at a local international training firm that partnered with small businesses to offer language and cultural services. The pay was more than I ever expected, 5 times what I earned at Heian Publishing House. At first, I wondered if it was a mistake, but on my 3rd week, my new boss, Ms. Ayumi Sato, invited me to coffee. She looked nervous. Then she said, "Can I tell you something strange? I used to follow your old Twitter account, Light in Kyoto. You led me to Jesus." My eyes filled with tears. The woman I now worked for was a secret believer, because of my testimony. Ayumi and I began praying together before and after work in her office, just quietly. She introduced me to others in the area, seekers, questioners, a few hidden Christians too afraid to speak publicly. We didn't have a church building, but we had living rooms, kitchens, and quiet parks. We started gathering in small groups once a week. I taught them the verses that gave me strength. I shared my testimony, not as a tragic story, but as a declaration of freedom. I reminded them that Jesus never promised us an easy life, but he promised eternal life. That's what matters. One girl, Aiko, cried when she heard my story. "I thought I was alone," she said. "Now I know I'm not." That's what this new life has become, helping people see that Jesus is not foreign, not distant, not a Western invention. He's real, alive, and calling out to the hearts of those who hunger for truth. To those of you watching or listening to this right now, maybe your heart feels like mine once did. You sit quietly in your room, carrying doubts that you can't share. You've bowed your head at the shrine, worn the omamori, whispered the rituals, but deep inside, you wonder if anyone is listening. You feel the emptiness, but you don't know what to do with it. I understand that. I was that girl. I did everything right, and still, I felt unseen. But I want to tell you this gently and clearly. Jesus sees you. You don't need to clean yourself up first. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to come. Ask him. Just ask. Jesus, if you are real, show me. That's what I did. I didn't have the right words or the right background, but he came to me anyway, and he will come to you too. Maybe you're afraid of what your family will say, what your community will think, what your job might do. I won't lie to you. Following Jesus comes with a cost. I lost my reputation. I lost my home. I spent weeks in a cold jail cell with no one but him. But hear me carefully. I gained more than I ever lost. I gained peace that doesn't fade when things go wrong. I gained purpose. I gained healing. I gained a knowledge that I am fully loved by the God who created the universe. I no longer live to impress anyone. I no longer perform out of fear. I live because he gave me life, and I would go through every trial again if it meant knowing him. He is worth it. Every scar, every tear, every lonely night, he turned it into a story of redemption. And now I live to tell it. If you're watching this and you're a believer already, but you're being persecuted, please don't give up. Don't let fear silence your faith. I know what it's like to feel completely alone, to wonder if anyone will stand with you. But I promise you, Jesus is standing with you. He was with me in that detention center. He was with me when my father called me a disgrace. He is with you in your school, in your workplace, even in your silence. If you've been hiding your faith, it's okay. He still loves you. Ask him for courage. He will give it. The same Spirit who gave boldness to Peter and John lives inside of you. You don't have to be loud to be faithful. Just be honest with him. He sees your heart. He knows your pain. You are not invisible, and you are never alone. He is closer than you think. Now I walk through life with a different kind of strength. I no longer seek validation from society or tradition. My worth comes from Jesus. Every morning I wake up, pray, and ask, Lord, who can I encourage today? And he always shows me someone. Sometimes it's a young woman at a bus stop. Sometimes it's a colleague struggling with depression. And sometimes it's someone messaging me anonymously online. I don't need a pulpit. My life is the message. The world may still misunderstand me. My family still refuses to speak to me. But I love them. I pray for them daily. And I believe in time, they too will see the light. Until then, I will keep walking, keep sharing, keep loving. Because I am not just a survivor. I am a daughter of God, saved, sealed, and sent to tell others that freedom has a name. And his name is Jesus Christ. To you, the one who stayed with me until now, thank you for listening. This isn't just my story. It can be yours too. Whether you come from Shinto, Buddhism, Islam, or no faith at all, Jesus is not limited by borders or culture. He is not Western. He is not foreign. He is the Savior of the world, and he loves you more than you can understand. You may not have a vision like I did. You may not feel anything at first, but if you open your heart, if you ask with sincerity, he will answer. He promised that, and he never breaks his promises. I am living proof. The girl who was abandoned, mocked, jailed, and forgotten is now healed, strong, and full of joy. Not because of luck or hard work, but because of grace. And if he did it for me, he can do it for you.